Right, my babies. Feelings, feelings, and a bit more feelings. Let's do this. Today's video is question. Your mind doesn't search for answers, but for an opinion to structure reality on top of, or one to fill a new gap. The questions aren't about the external world, which we attempt to make sense of, but to make sense of how we approach it. I'm trying to understand the architecture behind, I want to say, my wording, my organization of this. Your mind doesn't search for an answer, but for an opinion to structure reality on top of it. It makes sense because anytime there's something that we don't understand, why didn't it bother us before? Because it never existed within our scope. Let's say it never existed within our scope of interest, because we all know about AI, but nobody tried to understand how AI works. Or at least like I actively take steps to understand it better because like of what I'm doing and where I am when it comes to my startup and all that stuff. But the idea behind it is basically like, oh, okay, suddenly people are talking about AI, and then you go and you try to ask enough questions about AI or research in order to kind of fill that gap. So here, basically, the first part, which is your mind, doesn't search for an answer, but for an opinion to structure reality on top of, or to fill the new gap. And I think the difference between these two is involvement, because one is an opinion to structure reality on top of, which means like, sure, AI is part of the world, but is it part of my world? Is it part of my reality? So if it's part of my reality, then ultimately I need to have some form of intention or okay, so if it's a part of my reality, that means it's occupying a space within my reality. And space within your reality is a space where thought exists. And there has to be a connection between whatever you're incorporating and everything around you. So, for example, I'm a programmer, which means anytime I'm programming something, my mind has to kind of understand if AI works with it or not, if the blockchain works with it or not, or if databases work with it or not, or the software I'm using, right? It's my intention. It's part of my reality. It's part of my day-to-day activities or life or whatever. But on the other side, you kind of have like for example, like my father who uses AI to search for stuff, doesn't give a fuck. So I wasn't searching for an answer about AI, right? It's just using AI to fill the gap that was created by like its introduction to his reality. Because now that it's a part of his reality, where does it stand basically? Because there's an empty gap and it's AI. So anytime he does something, he doesn't dive into that part of his reality. He just want to use the word trusts, or at the very least, kind of like blindly relies on its existence to support the rest to support however everything in his reality is connected to AI. So maybe AI is too complicated. Let's look at it this way. You having a baby versus your cousin having a baby. You having a baby literally means now you have space in your head specifically for you, for that baby and the relationship with that baby, which means you being a father, you being a good parent, you being a person that sustains the household, all that kind of comes with it. So in a way, you have to project that like what you see in order into your reality. Like, you know, me as a father, me as a parent, me as that child as a life form, that child is a part of me, my wife as a mother, right? Or my partner as a mother, regardless. All of these are basically like are an opinion of something that you basically interact with in order to build a relationship, and the opinion naturally changes. Not a judgment, an opinion. On the other side, you becoming an uncle, well, depends on how deep you are with your family or how deep you're involved with that kid's life. But the idea behind it is the fact that that child basically is not really it's not really your responsibility, I guess. So your intentions towards it are as beautiful as they come because you're an uncle now or an aunt. But what happens is basically the child only exists when you see the child or when you see your family or your whoever had the child. Other than that, there's just a new added bit of information, which is basically like I'm an uncle slash I have a child. My friends or my family have a child. So the questions aren't about an external world which we attempt to make sense of. Because again, like if we take AI for me versus AI for my dad, it's the same thing that happened in the external world, but I'm seeing it on a much on a different. See, it's not different. I'm seeing it from multiple angles. Well, how it is as a technology, how it is as a social evolution, how it is as a basically support system for my work, and how it is as a search engine. I'm seeing all of that. My dad's only seeing one. I ask AI, they give me an answer, I move on. So it's not the questions that we ask ourselves or that we ask to the world in order for us to kind of like create an understanding are not really about the external world, which we attempt to make sense of. Because ultimately, like when I'm looking at AI, I'm trying to make sense of something in the outside world. When I'm looking at me being a father versus when I'm looking at my friends being a father, like something in the outside world has changed. But to make sense of how we approach it, that's why we kind of like ask questions, I guess. So we're not really searching for an answer, but we're either searching for an opinion in order for us to kind of like build that connection, or we're just basically filling in a gap. And when I say gap, a gap in our understanding, because like suddenly AI exists, and a lot of people only use like literally just yeah. There's a spectrum behind how deep you are and whatever it is and whatever AI is, or how deep you are and whatever being a father is, and that like those relationships that you build around that change that happens when something is impacted. Maybe it was easier for me than when I have a child, for example, my relationship with that child, my friend's relationship with that child. So for them, it's something new within their reality. But the truth is, basically, it's not their responsibility. But for me, it has become a big part of my reality. So like, I have to, and my understanding is literally about the journey of creation towards how I actually evolve my opinion towards the new thing that exists in my life, which is a reflection on how we approach the new stuff that the world throws at us. Because sometimes we approach them with like intent and intention and curiosity and expression, and sometimes we don't. Our approach is literally not void of interest, and that kind of like dictates our relationship with it, and it dictates the depth of our questions. I would say depth because as you ask more questions, it kind of like elaborates more and more and more into things. So an interesting approach is always after you ask a question, just ask why you asked it. What is interesting about what I'm doing that basically made me wanna have that conversation with myself? What is it about what is it about the thing that I'm doing that basically has given me that kind of like has triggered me in order for me to basically want to ask questions, right? True, it's always the case, But the line here is your mind doesn't search for an answer. It either searches for an opinion to structure reality on top of, or an opinion to fill the new gap. So my dad, when he asks me, he trusts my opinion. That's it. That's more than enough for him, right? He just took my opinion and fills the gap. Or for an opinion to structure reality on top of, where like kind of like take that opinion, you try to understand it differently, and you basically ask another question to get another opinion on that opinion. And that's basically research. Because ultimately it doesn't matter if it's proven or not, it's still somebody made that decision. And science these days finds a way to prove anything you fucking want. So when everything's off the when everything is a go, what is it? I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. But I love the fact that I established whatever understanding we have as just one of the layers, because the more attention you give something, the more layers you discover. And your goal is either to like take an opinion to fill a gap in your reality, or take an opinion to build your reality on top of it. That's the ending. I love it. It's a video. Love you guys.